A consistent theme in this podcast is the question, the issue of whether merit is a racist concept. And I want to discuss in this segment a really interesting book, which I have right here. It's called The Rise of the Meritocracy. It's by a British sociologist named Michael Young. And this is a fable, a kind of a fictional story, but one that you'll see in a moment has great relevance to what we've been talking about. So according to Michael Young, in this fictional story, Old England used to be a society which was not based on merit. He says, I'm imagining this society, and in fact, this is not a far invention, a society where most advancement occurs because of who you know, a nepotistical society where you get ahead because you're a member of the aristocratic class, or you're a lord, or your grandfather went to Oxford, and it's because your family has all these connections. So it's a society like that, where intelligence is distributed throughout the society. There are smart people in every social class and economic class. And you have lots of smart people in the lower class. Why? Because after all, that's not how you get ahead in the society. It's not based upon being smart. It's based upon kind of who you are, where you were born, and who you know. So that was let's call it the old world. And, says Michael Young, in that world, actually, if you were at the bottom of the heap, you didn't like it. But on the other hand, it did make you feel inferior. Let's say, for example, you're a serf working in a great house. You don't think, well, I'm an inferior person and that lord is a superior person. You just think, well, that guy lucked out. He got the better end of the straw. I got the short end of the stick. That's why I'm a serf. It's my bad luck. But it doesn't mean that I'm less capable than that guy, or less smart than that guy, or less witty than that guy. It just means that he knew the right people, he was born into the right family, and so on. But now, says Michael Young, let's conduct a social experiment, a kind of thought experiment. What if we were somehow in Great Britain, he says, writing in Great Britain, what if we were to establish a complete meritocracy? What if we were to equalize social conditions in such a way that everybody has a level playing field? Everybody gets to run, you may say, a fair race. Everybody gets to start at the same point, and the rules of competition are neutrally enforced. What asked Michael Young would happen? He says, well, since there are some differences that are due to nature itself, differences in height, in strength, in beauty, in speed, perhaps even in moral development or character, he says, obviously what you would get is not the elimination of a class structure, but the creation of a new class structure. But the difference, of course, is that the old class structure was based on nepotism, favoritism, and privilege, and the new class structure is based solely on merit. All vestiges of the old world have been removed. Everybody is competing in a fair race. And now what happens? Now, says Michael Young, we have a society that is more stratified than ever. Now, if you're looking for smart people, you won't find them in the lower class. Why? Because due to their smarts, they have moved up into the middle and now the upper class. Because after all, we now have a meritocracy. So now what you have is a stratified society, smartest people at the top, mediocre people in the middle, and really stupid people at the bottom. And he's not talking about this in terms of race. He's just saying this is the way it would be if you could achieve the liberal goal. This is the kind of punchline of the book. We all want a society of equal opportunity. We want a society where ultimately favoritism and privilege doesn't determine who gets ahead. We would like to have a society based on merit alone. But, says Michael Young, that society creates a system in which now, if you are at the top, you can genuinely feel, not that I lucked out, not that I knew that my uncle knew somebody who knew somebody. You go, I'm on top because I'm better. And so you have a sort of basis of arrogance at the top. And what do you have at the bottom? Well, says Michael Young, what you have at the bottom is humiliation. The people at the bottom have no excuse. I'm going to quote Young. He says basically that he says that the upper classes are no longer weakened by self-doubt and self-criticism. Today, the eminent know that their success is a just reward for their own capacity, for their own efforts, and for their own undeniable achievement. They deserve to belong to a superior class. And this is sort of the crusher. The people at the bottom have the dismaying recognition that they deserve to belong to the lower class. Why? Because they are not as fast, they are not as smart, they are not as good. And, says Michael Young, and this is how the story concludes, what happens is that there is just as much discontent in the merit-based system, which is then overthrown by a kind of revolution at the end. Why? Because it is too hard on the self-esteem of the people at the bottom. Now, what does this have to say to the race debate today? I think what it has to say is that merit today is producing some of the same inequality that racism once did. Of course, racism produced inequality arbitrarily. I'm better because I'm white. White supremacy. You deserve to be at the bottom. You're inferior. But if you have a system, let's just say, for example, in which we administer neutral math tests to everybody of the same age and in the same grade, you notice immediately that there are racial and ethnic differences. Some groups are on top, other groups in the middle, other groups at the bottom. Now, the new inequality is not produced by racism. The people at the top are not discriminating against the people at the bottom. They're outperforming them. They're doing better than them. But you notice that there's inequality again, but this time inequality based upon performance. And I think this is really why we are seeing an upsurge of race talk at a time when racism is actually almost nowhere to be found. We're seeing an upsurge of race talk to reinforce the self-esteem of the people who are not doing as well. It's basically as if to say, listen, you're not doing as well, not because your family structure is messed up. You're not doing well because you're living in a terrible neighborhood where you've got terrible public schools and you can blame the public schools or blame the Democratic establishment that administers the system. The whole idea is that you should take consolation, you should get power, you should get a sense of identity from the color of your skin. What could be more ridiculous than that? It's kind of like telling people to get their self-esteem from their bushy eyebrows, or from the fact that they've got flappy ears, or from the fact that they're a certain height. The Hutus are better because they're tall, the Tutsis are worse because they're short. This kind of stupidity, which we've seen all over the world, has now become epidemic on the basis of skin color in the United States. It's part of a kind of American disease, not a new disease, but a disease that today we see in a new form.